Well, good morning. I'm actually surprised to see so many folks here this morning at bright and early 8 a.m. I'm surprised to see myself here bright and early at 8 a.m. Yes, so how apropos that we get to speak about sleep. And my first slide is always a fun one. How well did everybody sleep last night? Everybody getting nice, good, long night's sleep? Or are we all a little jet lagged? Are we all still a little tired trying to figure out where we are and who we are and what's going on? I'm going to talk today, Melinda Kavanaugh, professor of social work at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee in the United States. And I'm going to talk today about two projects that really have built off a lot of work that I've been doing over the years, looking at how caregiving influences or has some sort of impact on the well-being of children and youth. And so when I say children and youth, I'm looking at individuals who are under the age of around 18 or 19. So we are looking at young children who are caregivers and how caregiving influences their well-being. So today we're going to talk about sleep. So sleep impacts everything that we do, right? It has everything to do with our self-perception, our mental health, our physical health, our social support, our school performance and attendance, our conference performance and attendance. It has to do with everything, and it is so, so critical to our overall functioning. But when we think about youth and adolescence, sleep is incredibly important. It is important for their developmental trajectory. It is important for their building their own mental health and well-being. It's particularly important as we look at the role of sleep and learning in children's school performance and attendance, right? So young children need lots of sleep, but as they go into adolescence, they need the most sleep. Sometimes the largest amount of sleep that we need developmentally is found in our later teens and early adulthood. But what we don't understand a lot about is how sleep influences the health and well-being of these children and youth when they're also providing care. We know that in the adult population, there has been research looking at how sleep influences the quality of care and the quality of life for adult caregivers who are up at night, who are doing very complex tasks. Well, what we do know from the research that both myself and many of my colleagues around the world have found is that children and youth are deeply involved in care. And this is bathing, feeding, toileting, transferring, watching throughout the day and into the evening. So we're putting the picture together and saying, we know that sleep is critical. We know that children and youth are deeply involved in care. But what we don't have a good enough understanding of is how sleep is influencing their well-being being a caregiver. So a couple of years ago, as part of a grant that my colleagues and I received through the NIH, through the Clinical and Translational Science Institute of Southeastern Wisconsin, we did a small feasibility study just to see, can we even get this kind of information from children and youth? So we had them wear an actigraphy device, something akin to an Apple Watch, not an Apple Watch, but something, in the words of the children, less cool. So it was a little clunky, but they wore it, and what we really wanted to see is, will children wear these things? Will we be able to track motion at a very, very sensitive level? And we found that they in fact would, and they did. And we found a really significant difference in not only the disruption of sleep across days, but the depth and the robustness of sleep between children and youth who are caregivers for a family member living with ALS and MND, and their non-caregiving counterparts. So that was the first kind of, okay, all right, we've got some basic information and we're seeing that there actually is something going on with these caregiving youth, that there is some disruption happening and there is something significantly different between them and their non-caregiving counterparts. How did I do that? Okay. All right. there we go. Woo! So our next study, we received a grant through the ALS Association to build out on that. And what we wanted to see is, was there something about that group? And what else was going on? Was there something happening around support and worry? We wanted to understand those concepts a little bit better because the first study was very brief and very hyper-focused just on sleep. And so what we did is we created an app for phone users, and they could use it on either an iOS or an Android. And the app asked them at the moment of care to tell us on a sliding scale, they could just slide their finger across from 0 to 100, a series of questions around support, around worry. We also had a pre-survey to where they filled out several of the promise measures, which are measures that looked at sleep, that asked about quality of life, that asked about social support, that asked about school performance and attendance. So we had some pre-survey data, and then we did it again at the end of 7 days. So over those 7 days, a different group of youth also wore the same actigraphy device. They completed the EMA, which is the Ecological Momentary Assessment Protocol that my colleague at the University of California, Merced, does a lot of work around, and it's really, it's a really powerful way to capture something in the moment of whatever it is you're doing, right? So we have our phone, you open the app, and then in that moment of care, you can tell us what care you're doing and how you feel about that care at that moment. So we had 21 youth in this next level of study. We had 12 caregivers and 9 non-caregivers. They ranged in age from 12 to 19. They wore the device for 7 days. We had a total of 260 assessments from the 21 youth. So they did assessments at 3 time points, set time points throughout the day, but then they also had these care moments, and these care moments are what I'm going to spend a little bit more time on today. There's a tremendous amount of data that you can collect using this type of method, and it's very easy. Again, everybody has their phone 24/7 with them, so particularly kids. So they were not burdened in any way, shape, or form. So at these care assessments, we had 3 very specific questions we wanted them to answer for us. Worry. So we were wanting to know, so a lot of the previous literature helps us understand that children and youth do worry about the person that they're providing care for, even not in that care moment, right? And adult caregivers, absolutely. You're kind of preoccupied, you're thinking about care, you're wondering how they're doing and what's going on. Then we wanted to understand perceived resources. And when I say resources, I mean personal resources. So we wanted to know how they felt that they had what they needed as an individual, as a person, to provide care. And the reason why we asked that is so much of our earlier research really hinted at, and the qualitative data helped us explore, that children and youth feel a sense of responsibility. And they feel a sense of, I can do this. I have this. I know what's going on. And we wanted to know if that was actually happening in the moment of care as well. And then lastly, we wanted to understand support. Do they have outside support? And this is support, again, outside of themselves. So we're interested in the worry piece, that perseveration worry. We're interested in, I've got this, I have the own personal resources, and then we're interested in the external support. So I wanted to just highlight a little bit about the caregiving that we did capture. So you'll see that at any point in time, they're doing all types of care. Now, the most common type of care is what we kind of consolidated into basic care. And this is where bathing, feeding, and toileting comes into play. Then we have emotional care. That is where they're attending to the emotional well-being. They're having discussions around either an external kind of show of emotion of their loved one. Then housekeeping and hygiene. So the difference between hygiene and basic care, we broke out hygiene to specifically be around toothbrushing. So I know we didn't label it in the best way, but we were trying to figure out how to split that up because basic care absorbed the rest of those kind of bathing and toileting care tasks. Then you'll see that the frequency of tasks, so primarily they're just doing one task at a time, so about 67%. But if you look down, this is at any given moment, right? So at any given moment, the majority of youth are doing one care task. But we see that they're also around 15% are doing two tasks. Some are doing three. Now, all the way at the bottom, you'll see that there are youth who reported at any given moment doing 6 tasks at a time. Now, it wasn't the largest sample, but the fact that there's any child or youth out there doing 6 tasks at a time should make us just pause for a moment. So accumulated sleep, worry, resources, and support. So the first one is, I'll go over this graph with you. So to the left there, that is the hours of sleep. Right? So then the bottom, we'll see we have low, moderate, and high worry. So they were able to, across this sliding scale, tell us the level of worry. So what we found is the high level of worry, the more worry they reported, the less sleep. Right? So they're kind of perseverating over their worry, and we're looking at their actigraphy, and their sleep is, the less sleep they have, the more worry. Then we look at resources, and as a reminder, this is their personal resources. This is how they feel that they have within themselves to provide care. So you'll see that the more resources they felt, the more they felt, I got this, I could do this, their sleep was actually affected. They were sleeping less the more they really felt like they could do it themselves, right? The opposite is when they felt they had external support. The more external support they had, the more sleep they got, right? This isn't necessarily rocket science, but it's good to see it kind of displayed this way because it helps us, again, kind of fill in the picture of what's happening with these children and youth. So when they feel they've got it, they are being these strong, independent individuals, their sleep's affected. But when outside support is provided, when they feel they have people helping them, that's when their sleep improves, right? But what we also know is that caregiving does not end when they're not caregiving. So one of those questions again, are you worried about not being there to provide care if they need it? So the first way we looked at that is to try to kind of tease out this information. And we looked at, is there a relationship between worry and off to the side, you'll see those are that sliding scale, right? So that's that sliding scale of emotions. And what we found is that there's an absolute correlation between, not shocking, high levels of worry and negative emotions. And this is where we think about anxiety and depression. Right? Those things are going hand in hand, not in the moment of care. So this is when they are not providing care. Same thing with stress. These are children who are not in the moment of care, but they're letting us know that they are still worried and they have high levels of stress. So even in the absence of care, going about their everyday business, now remember we had 3 time points of set survey data. Right? Then in the moment of care, they could tell us how they felt. So these are times when they're not providing care, but they're still telling us that they're worried and stressed. So what does all of this mean, right? At 8 a.m., woo! Sleep is critical. And it is absolutely affected by several issues. Even when they feel they have the resources, they're still worrying. They're sleeping less. And they often are not asking for help because, again, they feel they have the resources, right? Outside support is so critical. And this was some of my very earliest research many years ago was asking children and youth, what do you need to help? What do you need? What can people do to help you? And right away, these issues of outside support came just bombarding in the research. And that's why the other day I talked about the Y-Care program, which is a program that gives children support and skills to provide care. So our takeaway, and I am a social worker and I am a social work professor, so I'm always thinking about the application. Where are our intervention points? What can we do to apply this? And I see you. So young carers, they grow up faster, they take on a lot of responsibility, but they don't always ask for help. Intervention point. Where can we offer help? How can we intervene without having them come to us? They may feel like they can handle it, but their sleep is affected. When they have support, they worry less and sleep better. Intervention point. Let's provide support there. But they still worry, even when they aren't providing care. More worry, less sleep. Intervention point. So let's think about this issue of children and youth as caregivers as opportunity to really expand what we do and don't know, and conceptualize what caregiving means and how we can expand it to include children and youth, but also expand it to say, how can we help them and how can we support them without kind of pathologizing, which is what often happens with children and youth. I'll leave you with a quote. I felt like a 40-year-old even when I was a teenager. Relying on assumed internal resources combined with high levels of worry and care responsibilities ages our young carers faster. So this is a young adult who came back and did some some interviews with me much later after being a young carer, and this is how they responded. So next steps, we have an expansion study looking at this in Alzheimer's and related dementia with my colleagues at the Medical College of Wisconsin, looking at a larger study in that population. Thank you for our funders. Thank you to my wonderful research team, and absolutely thank you for all the children and youth who are so kind and wear that big clunky ugly actigraphy device. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We do have time for questions. There's one up front, there's one here. Do we have microphones?
I love it. Everybody.
So 40 years old is old, Melinda? Is that what you're saying?
Dude, you know I had to bite my tongue when they said that. I was like, really? Good luck. Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The concept of children and youth. So it's been changing the concept. You quoted until 21, and it seems that, at least from insurance purposes in America, children are under insurance until 26. So it's almost like the young ones, the age is changing. Are you planning research moving into older?
Yeah, so actually they were only up to 19, but there were 21 in the study. So so the age cutoff for this was 19. But absolutely, I have a couple of different colleagues in different parts of the U.S. where we're building projects looking at, because what's missing in the data is anything longitudinal. So this is worldwide young care data. We don't have good longitudinal data that says what happens after 5, 10, 15 years, 20 years. And so we are looking at that kind of young adult or youngish adult, kind of between 20 and 26, to get a better sense of what's happening there. We do know that from some anecdotal and from some smaller qualitative studies, that age group, they're putting off things like going to college, things like having children, getting married, because of their care responsibilities that are now extending into their own adulthood. That's a great question.
Thank you for answering the second one.
Oh, did I just intuit it?
Gunjan has a question up front here.
Thank you. For me, it's kind of, we are breaking the human rights of the children to force them to help and delay their childhood and so on. So we must all fight for the right of children to be children, So do you agree?
I do agree, and it's probably the most complex question, and I get it asked all the time. By no means am I a proponent of forcing children to do anything. The majority of children in my research are often in the role of caregiver for economic reasons. Right, particularly in the United States, the way healthcare is structured, and our lack of consistent and accessible healthcare and social care. So what we end up with is, this kind of army, if you will, of children and youth who are participating care, not in a forced way, but because a family need. There's also a very large cultural piece at play, and I'm going to call out Haley, who is one of my South African colleagues. In a lot of the work that we've done in South Africa, it's hugely cultural, and there's a level of expectation. I will say one more thing really quickly. Very few youth that I've interviewed, and I've now interviewed, I'm not sure, maybe close to 1,000 over the years, very few say that they don't enjoy it or that they get some sort of negative response from it. There is a huge positive piece here. They do want to help. They feel a sense of positivity and enjoyment almost. But the thing is with any care, we can hold that in the same space that we hold our stress and our burden and our anxiety. So these are not things that happen. These are not mutually exclusive. So it's a great question, Gudjun. Yes.
We have time for one more online question.
Kathy's. Yeah, Kathy. Oh.
I've got a question here from Kevin Robinson at Niels.
Hi, Kevin.
It's two-part. So first, was there any indication that the app itself was beneficial as sort of external support? And then more specifically, did having the app available to tell how they feel help?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Kevin. I don't know to the first question, like what, do we have some sort of evidence that it was useful? That I do not know. I would guess that it might be because it could have been perceived as someone acknowledging them. That's what we also run into in this research, is that children and youth aren't acknowledged for what they do. And so it could be that was playing a role there. But I love that question. I already lost the second question. I didn't sleep well
more
last night.
Specifically, did having the app available to tell how they feel help?
Possibly. Yeah, possibly. Kathy is frantically waving in the corner.
All right, Kathy.
I know. I'm so...
Just because Melinda was up first at 8
Because
o'clock.
I had to go
I'll
first.
allow her one more question.
Thank you. It's not a question, it's a comment from my colleague Yohei, who flew 13,000 kilometers to be with us, so I wanted to make sure that this got into the record. It says, thank you very much for the wonderful performance. It was very fulfilling content that I would like to share with my company's employees in Japan. Thank you.
I would be absolutely honored to do so. So I will come find you, Yohei. Absolutely. I think I'm done now.
Yes. Thank you so much, Melinda. That was awesome.